One of the most common pieces of language learning advice that you will hear is go to the country, go to the USA, go to the UK, go to Australia. If you go to an English-speaking country, then you will definitely learn English really quickly. And for those who do have this option of going to an English-speaking country, it can be a good idea. But going to an English-speaking country like the UK or the USA is not some kind of magic technique where after a few months or a year in the country, your English is just amazing or close to perfect. In this video, I want to talk about why going to an English-speaking country is not always the best thing to do. The truth is that beginners will not learn that much by visiting an English-speaking country. Of course, if you move to an English-speaking country permanently, then this is a fantastic thing to do, and it will really help your English. But just visiting, going for 1 week or 2 weeks or something like that, is not going to help a beginner very much. There's this myth around about immersion, which basically says that if you move to an English-speaking country, you will kind of automatically, without really having to try very hard, you will automatically just learn English just because you're in the country. And as somebody who has taught English for many years, I can tell you that this is not true. I have spoken to many students who have moved to the USA, who have moved to the UK, and still don't really have a very high level of English. In fact, I've even spoken to people who have been living in an English-speaking country for 10 or 15 years and still don't speak any English whatsoever. Yes, they have lived there for more than 10 years and they still speak zero English. And that goes to show that just because you go to an English-speaking country, that does not mean that you will automatically just learn English by magic. Now, the problem with going to an English-speaking country when you are an A1 or an A2 beginner of English is that all of the input which is around you in the country is too high level for you. In the real world, English is not usually spoken at the beginner level. When you come to an English-speaking country, most of what you hear and maybe read around you is going to be either intermediate or advanced level English, which is not very helpful for a beginner student. If you go to an English-speaking country as a beginner, you will really just not understand what anybody is saying around you 90% of the time. All of the conversations around you will be spoken quickly at full speed, and they will be using lots of phrasal verbs, lots of slang, and lots of idioms. And all of these things, which are common in daily speech, are actually quite advanced English. Even in so-called basic conversations, as a beginner, you will still find it quite difficult to understand. You may think that a British person will go to the cafe and ask, "Could I have 1 cup of coffee, please?" But of course, that is not what's going to happen in the real world. Most British people don't speak like this. Instead, if you come to the UK and you go to a cafe, you will hear something like this. "I'll just grab a latte to go, please, if that's all right." And then they get their coffee and they'll say, "All right, cheers, have a good one," like that. Now that kind of thing, even though it's an apparently basic situation in a cafe, it's actually quite difficult for a beginner to understand a conversation like that. That's the problem with going to an English-speaking country as a beginner. And it's just that everything around you, everything you hear is just too difficult. And as we know from comprehensible input that is too difficult for you is not really very good to learn from. As a beginner English speaker, you would actually be better to watch videos online made for the A1 or A2 beginner level than you would coming to the UK and trying to speak and understand English in the UK. I have my own example of this problem with learning Spanish. When I was about an A2 beginner level Spanish speaker, I took a trip to Spain, and I thought that it would be really good for my Spanish. I thought that if I spent 3 months in Spain, that my Spanish would improve so much. However, I did not find this to be the case. Instead, everywhere that I went in Spain, every interaction that I had with anybody, it was all too difficult. Even going to the supermarket or going to the cafe, I could not understand what people were saying. Any conversation I tried to have with a Spanish speaker in Spain would usually stop or finish quite quickly when the other person realized that this guy cannot understand what I'm saying. However, when I was in Spain, at the end of the day, I would come back to my apartment, open my laptop, and watch Comprehensible input at the beginner level in Spanish, and that's when I felt I was actually learning. That's when I felt I was improving. But walking around Spain and trying to speak with people or interact with people, I found it did not really feel like I was improving at all. And it was a little bit frustrating as well. So even though I was in Spain, the country where Spanish is spoken, I was still learning more from my laptop, from YouTube, than I was from actually being in the country. In fact, being in the country did not really help very much at the beginner level. Now, sometimes in the real world in Spain, I did get input which was at the beginner level for me. In one situation, I was at the train station and I was trying to use the ticket machine, and I had my card and I was looking for where do I put in my card into the ticket machine, and the worker there, he shouted over, "Arriba, arriba," like that. And I realized, I knew that word, arriba, I knew that it means up. So I looked up, and there, the place to put my card was up. So that was one piece of input that I got from Spain that I understood. That is one of the only things, actually, that I understood during that trip, because it was beginner level things. Arriba is a very beginner level word in Spanish, and that's why I could understand it. But everything else that people were saying, it just sounded to me like blah, 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 blah. I could not understand what they were saying because I was a beginner and they were talking at an B2 or C1 advanced level. So of course I couldn't understand what they were saying. Now, I had a great time in Spain. However, in terms of language learning, I honestly would have been better just staying in the UK and using my laptop to keep watching Comprehensible input at the beginner level, rather than going to Spain as a beginner and trying to use Spanish as a beginner, when the environment in the country is not good for beginners, right? If you come to an English speaking country, you know, the UK is not a beginner English environment, right? It's an advanced English environment. So if you're a beginner in the UK, it is going to be very difficult for you because you're not in a beginner environment, if that makes sense. All of the input that you are hearing is at a high level. So as a beginner, it's going to be difficult for you to learn in that situation. If you do want to come and visit an English-speaking country, I think you will have a much more fun time if you are already at least the B1 intermediate level before you come. At least, even then, if you are even at a B1 level, it will still be quite difficult for you. But at least when you are a B1 student, coming to the UK or coming to the USA may actually be helpful for you. Because as an intermediate student, you will actually be able to understand some of the things that people are saying and some of the text on the signs and so on. I would say the best time to come to an English-speaking country would actually be when you are a B2 upper intermediate or an advanced student. That's when you can really enjoy using English, and that's when you can really meaningfully interact with the world in an English-speaking country. As a beginner, you can't really have proper conversations with people, you can't really say very much. Like I said before, beginners are often better in front of their laptops in their rooms, learning English from there, than they are in the real world talking to people. Now, having said all that, if you are somebody who is very social and you like to get out into the world and you like to talk with people and meet people, then okay, moving to an English-speaking country, maybe you are the kind of person who can do it, right? There are some people who are very confident, very social, and can basically just go out, speak to anyone, even in basic English, and kind of make relationships with people, even with basic English. To be honest, I don't think this is the average person. I think for the average person, going to an English-speaking country as a beginner will be a very difficult time, right? It will be a very hard thing to do, and most people are not that comfortable trying to speak to people and make relationships with people when they are a beginner. The average person would probably be better getting at least an intermediate level before they visit an English-speaking country. So yeah, basically the message of this video is that just going to an English-speaking country will not magically make you learn English. Like I said, I know many people who have moved to and live in English-speaking countries and still their English is not so good, probably because they are staying in their little communities with other speakers of their own language rather than really interacting with the local culture. For me, in my opinion, the people who have made the best progress after moving to an English-speaking country are those who already had a decent level of English. Those who already had an intermediate level, they learned by themselves in their own countries a lot until they got an intermediate level at least, and then they went to an English-speaking country. Sometimes I have seen people progress really quickly in 1 year living there. But those who moved there as beginners, from my experience, those who move to an English-speaking country as a beginner do have quite a hard time when they arrive, because it is just overwhelming. Everything they are hearing, they can't understand anybody, and it is a little bit overwhelming. Look, moving to or visiting an English-speaking country like the UK, the USA, Australia, or anywhere else is a really cool thing to do. My point is that you will have a lot more fun and you will get a lot more out of it if you study hard at home before you go. Okay, if you try to reach an intermediate level before you go to these places, you will have a much more fun time and it will be a lot more helpful for you. And the other message of the video is, just because you are in the UK, that doesn't mean you will magically learn English. You still need to put in the work when you come here. Even if you live in the UK, you should still be listening to comprehensible input on your laptop or on your phone, right? You should still be trying to learn, because just because you're in the country, that does not mean that you're going to learn automatically. Okay, that's the end of the video. I hope that made sense. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. If you want more videos like this, go to EnglishSponge.com. On the website, you can find videos from many different teachers. You can choose which level you want: A1 beginner, A2 beginner, B1 intermediate, or B2 upper intermediate. You can choose which accent you want to listen to: American, British, Australian, and also other accents. You can choose which topic you want to listen to: And you can choose which grammar point you want to focus on. The website will track your time, so you can see how many minutes you have listened to comprehensible input today, yesterday, and for the whole month. So go to EnglishSponge.com. The link is in the description of the video.